All right, just like we need to be able to convert feet to inches and inches to feet, we also need to be able to convert radians to degrees and vice versa. And this is because radians are more useful in some situations, like finding arc length, while degrees are better in other situations. So again, what if we're given an angle measure in degrees, but we need to know radians in order to find arc length? How are we going to convert from one unit of measure to the other? Well, in order to do this, we need to know exactly how many degrees there are in every 1 radian. So there are exactly, or the conversion factor that we're going to use is that every pi radians contains 180 degrees. If we want to convert to degrees, I'm simply going to multiply by 180, and notice that the unit I'm trying to convert to becomes the numerator of my fraction. And likewise, if we want to convert degrees to radians, it's still the same conversion factor, but because we're trying to find radians, I'll put the pi radians on top, the 180 degrees in the numerator. All right, so in number 1, it says convert 60 degrees to radians. So the first thing I'm going to do is write down my 60 degrees. I'm going to put it as a fraction over 1, just because my conversion factor here is always going to be a fraction. I want to convert to radians. So pi radians goes in the numerator of that fraction over the 180 degrees in the denominator. And now just a quick recap on multiplying fractions. Remember that when you multiply fractions, you're going to multiply the numerators. So 60 times pi becomes 60 pi. And then multiply the denominators. 1 times 180 becomes 180. And now you're going to use your calculator to simplify that fraction. 60 over 180 becomes 1 over 3. So this is 1 pi over 3, which could also be written as pi over 3, or you may also see written as 1/3 pi. And you need to recognize and be able to make the determination that all 3 of those fractions are different ways of representing the exact same value. All right, number 2, go ahead and convert 7 pi or 7/12 pi radians to degrees. I'm going to go ahead and put that pi over 1, and I'm going to make this 7 pi over 12. So 7 pi over 12 is the number of radians that we want to convert to degrees. Since we're going to degrees, the 180 degrees becomes the numerator of my fraction. The pi radians becomes the denominator. And again, I'm simply going to multiply 7 times pi times 180 degrees for my new numerator. And my new denominator becomes 12 times pi. And what's nice and convenient about this is that the pi's will cancel out. And then I'm simply going to get my calculator out, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to calculate 7 times 180 for the numerator. I'm going to put that over 12 on the denominator. My calculator tells me that's worth 105 degrees. All right, number 3, convert 160 degrees to radian measure. So again, I'm going to start with that 160 degrees. I'm going to put it over 1. I want to go to radians. So pi radians becomes the numerator of my fraction over 180 degrees. And I'm simply going to multiply. So this becomes, sorry, that's a multiplication. 160 pi in the numerator, 180 in the denominator. And I'm simply going to go type the fraction 160 over 180 into my calculator. It tells me that fraction is 8/9. So I can either say that's 8/9 pi or 8 pi over 9 radians. Again, you need to recognize that those 2 fractions are 2 different ways of representing the exact same value. Number 4 asks me to convert degrees to radians. So again, I'm going to start with that 300 degrees, which I'm going to place over 1. I want to go to radians. So pi radians becomes the numerator of my fraction. 180 degrees becomes my denominator. Go ahead and multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and then use your calculator to simplify the fraction. So is either equal to 5/3 pi, or if you prefer, 5 pi over 3. They name exactly the same value. All right, and then the last one, number 5, convert pi over 4 radians to degrees. So this is already a fraction. I don't need to worry about rewriting it as an equivalent fraction. This time we're going to degrees, so 180 degrees goes in the numerator of my fraction. Every 180 degrees is worth pi radians, so that's my conversion factor. So I end up with pi times 180 degrees over 4 times pi. And again, the pi's will cancel out. I'm left with 180 divided by 4, which when I simplify on my calculator, tells me is worth 45 degrees. All right, you can go ahead and, again, summarize in your own words so that it's meaningful and relevant to you, the important understandings and the important findings that you found in the video, and then see if you can apply what you've learned to solve the problems on the following page.